welcome to the videography skills webinar, our last of our YRE lunchtime skills-based seminar. So my name is Claire and I look after Young Reporters for the Environment Ireland. For anyone who's new to the programme, we just launched recently this year. We had our first webinar on article writing and with David Robbins, which you can watch back on our YouTube channel, and then photography skills last month with Nisha Kulhan. And today we're going to be learning all about creating your own 3-minute videos for the competition. And I'm going to run through the competition itself and their criteria. And then I'm going to hand over to our very special guest, Johnny Gogan, who's a writer, producer, and director of over 20 films, and 2 of his most recent ones available on Netflix. And he'll tell a little bit more about his background shortly. I'm also joined with Deirdre from Green Campus. We have a few campuses entering this year as well, and Rob Nelson here as well, who's great experience of the program too. So we'll all be here to share some tips, and please feel free to pop in questions along the way that you have about the competition itself or about videography skills too. And this will also be recorded and available to watch on playback on our YouTube as well. So thanks everyone for attending today. As I said, I will run through the program criteria. And then pass you over to Johnny for about 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end and allow you to get back to your lunches then as well. So just to start with then, what exactly is the YRE program? It's run by the Foundation of Environmental Education based in Copenhagen, which you may know is the parent body for Green Campus, Green Skills, and the Blue Flag program. It started off in secondary schools here and has since expanded into 3rd level and acts as a showcase for Step 6 and informing and involving. The essence of the program is to encourage students to investigate specific environmental issues in their community, propose solutions, and then articulate findings through the media of article writing, videography, or through video, through a campaign or a report style video. And the maximum then is 3 minutes. So the development of the program then, just to recap, is the YRE program celebrates 30 years this year. So we'll be sharing loads of kind of previous entries and examples over the years as well shortly. So do check out our exposure channels for that. There's over 495,393 young reporters involved. And themes have now expanded into climate action, loss of biodiversity, pollution, and then there's also another category. So it really broadens your scope as journalists and supports the 17 global goals in a very multifaceted way. So reporting can take on any issue, so from travel, air quality, energy use, litter and waste, to biodiversity and climate change. The judges of the competition are very keen to see entries that identify and offer solutions to these areas. So we do like to see the solutions embedded in these videos as well. Just to go over then the 4-step methodology, so the judging criteria for the videos. So it's underpinned by a simple tested 4-step methodology. So firstly, program participants identify an issue in their locality, in the school, on a campus, at home, or at a city level, regional, national level. And the scope is very broad. So as I mentioned, from energy, biodiversity, waste, air quality, investigating what's already out there, seeing what's available on the internet, and going and doing your own research through interviews, questionnaires, Vox, whatever you feel comfortable with, and gathering your own data and photographs and video footage as much as possible. And then secondly, researching a solution to this. And again, the scope is very broad through desktop analysis, data collection, quantitative or qualitative in the form of interviews, especially essentially this is the hypothesis testing stage, and we'll see some examples of this later on. So see what's already been proposed by experts and what others have already said, and then go out and listen to as many debates and opinions to make your own informed opinion, and using your own photos and videos of solutions that are lying around. The purpose of these initial steps is to focus on that critical analysis and rigor in the journalistic process. And then the third step involves the creation of your video to communicating these ideas. The final step then being dissemination. So this is a really important aspect as well. Participants take their work and send it out into the world. So it can be in the form of your campus bulletins, newspapers, social media groups and forums, local media as well, even up to as far as RTE, and it's part of the judging process as well. So tracking metrics here are counting for marks in the competitions, which I'll speak a little bit later on. So share your footage wherever possible. We'll be doing our own part here as well to promote your entries through our Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, as well as our exposure channels, which is designed specifically to highlight journalistic content. And we'll share those links a little bit later on. In terms of resources, then we are keen to help you wherever we can to develop these skills and acquire the knowledge which can help create international winning entries, and that will stand to you in the long term. So communication skills, critical skills, analysis, social responsibility are all honed through involvement in the programme. We do have a copy of the handbook, which would have been sent to everyone on registration, and this contains useful advice about competition, judging criteria, tips on crafting your videos. If you don't have a copy of this, do drop me a line and I can send it on to you. And then the website resources as well. So the international website in particular has some really good video tutorials as well as best practices. And there's a good document as well on YRE and the Sustainable Development Goals for those interested too, and if you're generating ideas as well, it might be useful. The Irish website then has more detailed information on the national competition, including entry criteria and guidelines. We have our 3 webinar workshops that are recorded and available on our YouTube channel, so do check that out as well. The Fee Academy, it's an online learning platform, so do get in touch with me if you're interested in doing a course. There's some YRE courses there, and there is one particularly for videography skills, and it takes about 2 to 3 hours in your own time. So do get in touch with me if you're interested in attending this. And then our exposure amplification as well. So exposure is a tool that acts, it transforms your the articles, photographs or videos onto a website. So it turns into shareable professional pieces for online audiences. So we publish and share content throughout the year. And the international exposure side too. And it allows us to be current without having to wait for the end of year. And you can embed photographs and videos as well as articles for easy sharing on social media. The timeline for this year then, just to recap for anyone who missed our last webinars, the deadline is coming fast on the end of the month, on the 26th of April. We had 2 previous webinars on article writing and photography as well. And if you missed any of these, you can watch back on our YouTube channels as well. And then the award date will be decided then in May or June time. So the culmination of the YRE programme is the national competition that takes place in May, and the prize fund is 1,500 collectively for green schools and campuses, and it's a great incentive to get involved. So in the past, we've given away tablets, GoPros, even cash for winners and runners-up as well. You can enter as an individual and also as a group. There are no limits there, but just bear in mind if you're entering as a group that the prize will be split between the group as well. The judges look for evidence of critical thinking and originality in entries, and points are awarded for evidence of dissemination, so how you're sharing your work. So it's really important to include this with your entries. The national competition guidelines, terms and conditions are all available on yreireland.org, where you can get more information about the criteria in detail. So now on to the video category itself. The 2 categories are your reported video documentary. They're similar to just mini documentaries. So they're based on news events, history, facts, etc. And they use elements of direct observation, research, interviews, and documentation. And then we have an environmental campaign video category, and this aims to raise awareness of an issue, promote certain values, and or inspire positive action through live images. The campaign story can be staged with the intention of sending a message to your viewers. So again, I said the maximum is 3 minutes. One page of, say, a written report usually equates to about 60 to 90 seconds on screen. And remember to include your title and caption there. So it's about 140 characters max there in your title and caption. And if you have used statistics and facts in your description, remember to cite your resources in a reference list at the end. And some things just to note is, does your video address like historical, economic, social, and political implications of your topic through the environmental lens? Does it show a truthful representation of reality? And think about whether your video shows a link between local and global issues and events. If your video shows an environmental problem, do you also share realistic solutions for it? So it's really important to show your own proposed solutions there, and include where and who you shared your video with as well. And this, again, as I mentioned, through your dissemination. You chose original and creative topics for your video, and research and interviews that you may have left your school to do the videos is really important as well. So you can have a look at the final criteria too, that will be up on our website. And then another thing we would just make sure is that it's supported by YouTube format, MP4 preferred. We do have more file structure requirements up on our website, but if you have any questions, do just drop me a line on this as well. And just as well, just a note on the structure that there is the introduction, flow, your conclusion, and solutions in there as well. So they're kind of just the main criteria for the video category. I do encourage everyone to have a look at the online portfolio. The Irish one is linked here, and then the international one too. I'll pop it in the chat in a moment, and you can see all the examples of the previous international winners. So I'm going to just briefly play one of the first place international winners from last year. It was titled Think About It. And it was made in Sweden, and it was from May 2023, a short film about our consumption relating to Goal 12, sustainable consumption and production, and the complexities within our supply chains are highlighted, sustainable production and shopping locally. There's a good structure in place. You'll see the intro, conclusion, solutions, well researched. There's 3 interviews. And a really good application of that 4-step methodology. And this came first place in the 15 to 18 years category.
Vilken ska jag välja? Sånt här är alltid så svårt. Vi besökte 3 lokala företag som fick berätta förslag på sina hållbara lösningar.
Ja, det gör vi. Vi försöker ju själva också köpa produkter här lokalt så långt det går. Så bland annat har vi en produkt som är fatlagrad som vi doppar i bivax för att försluta korken. Och då köper vi bivax ifrån grannbyn här då, en producent här mitt bi.
All choklad vi använder vi oss av Malmö chokladfabrik. Den är, vad man säger, tillverkad i Sverige. Och de har superbra koll på de kakaoleverantörer som de använder. Och de är fair trade och ekologiska. Och när man köper billigare choklad så är det oftast inte särskilt schysst producerat. Det är otroligt mycket människohandel, det är otroligt mycket barnarbete och slavförhållanden som pågår på plantagen.
Genom att köpa svenska produkter så startar ju lokalsamhällen i Sverige. Vi bidrar ju med att vi till exempel skapar arbetstillfällen här i Härnösand och omnejd och köper våra produkter som stöttar ju liksom Härnösand också som helhet.
Ett av de globala målen, mål nummer 12, står för hållbar konsumtion och produktion. Vår planet har försett oss med ett överflöd av naturresurser, men vi människor har inte nyttjat det på ett ansvarsfullt sätt. För att nå detta mål behöver vi tänka på vad och hur vi handlar. Till exempel söka upp fakta innan du köper något eller handla lokalt.
Det är en rätt komplex fråga. Det är lätt att man vill liksom vara svart eller vit, men det är liksom, den är väldigt mångfacetterad. Men jag tycker också att det finns ett ansvar, exempelvis i Bangladesh, att vi har västvärlden och dess företag har funnits där i 40-50 år. Vi har byggt upp en industri som är helt avgörande för deras ekonomi. Och att liksom bara, nej men nu drar vi hemåt, nu skiter vi i det här. Det hade varit högst liksom oansvarsfullt, utan att vara på plats och skapa någonting bra. Det är viktigt. Så det är klart det kommer alltid finnas en global handel, men jag tycker att liksom, då är det viktigt också att man tar sitt ansvar som företag, vart man än verkar, och ser till att den blir bra.
That's just one example there. There are a number of international first place winners from the 3 categories, 11 to 14. That was 15 to 18 years. And then there's the 19 to 25 years too. So they're clearly laid out on the YRE International page. So do have a look at some ideas and inspiration there. So now without further ado, I want to hand you over to Johnny Gogan. Very excited to hear from him today. So I've just left my details there if you do have further inquiries about the competition itself. So thanks everybody.
Right. Hello everybody, nice to be joining you. Yeah, Johnny Gogan's my name. I've been making films for about 30 years. Started making drama films and then subsequently got into documentary, and I might just refer to kind of some of the overlap between documentary and drama later on. But to kick off, I suppose I wanted to just talk, whether your film is 3 minutes long or 2 hours long, a lot of the principles remain the same. The obvious one being every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But firstly, I always kind of think that if you're talking to people about making a film, it's really good to take on a subject that you know something about. That's something that's that has some kind of personal connection to you, that you'll be bringing some insight into from your own personal experience, in addition to the research that you're going to be doing on the story. So the other thing then is that that story may be personal to you. You may have some personal insight, but it will need to kind of connect to the universal in some ways. So, for example, I was joking with, I'm working here on a film at the moment, and I was talking to my editor. He says, "Yeah, if you look at TikTok, there's loads of videos about people and their pets, and you know, but actually making a film about your pet is absolutely legitimate, but it's not going to be interesting for an audience per se unless there's something that the audience can identify with." So for example, so your pet goes missing, so that you have the beginning of a story there, because then you're going to have to go out and find your cat, and but that in itself will need more to it than that. There may be some kind of twist in that story that actually, if anybody remembers that story about the cat, Six Dinner Sid, that actually your cat isn't missing at all. In fact, actually it's off dining with one of the neighbors, and the neighbors themselves are concerned about that Sid, the cat, is missing as well. So so you're going to have those kind of reversals in the story, or those kind of surprises, And that's really, and even with 3 minutes in a story, it's a long time in a story in terms of, because people's attention spans increasingly are shorter because of the way we watch story now. It's so easy to kind of switch. The days that I and many of the older people in the webinar here, where when we watched things on television, we sat down and watched often with our family, and we would have to stay watching them for an hour, even if we weren't that interested in the story, because there wasn't much else on television. So attention span is something that you're going to be fighting with in terms of getting people to engage with your story. So know something about what you're talking about, but also you need to have story development in order to engage an audience and to engage in some ways with the universal theme of the story that you're telling. In terms of kind of talking about making things that are very close to home, I made a film about my grandfather, which might, for a long time I resisted because it just seemed very close to home. And but actually it wasn't until I discovered things about him in terms of his pro-German sympathies in the Second World War that that actually really started to kind of engage me in wanting to know more, but also at the same time was interesting for the audience. It was uncomfortable because I had to interview his children about his and their pro-German sympathies in the Second World War, and but that was actually something that was challenging, but also ultimately more and more interesting for the audience as we engaged in that kind of historical theme, but also on that personal dimension to the story. When you're making a film, yes, you need insight, but you also need to do research. You really often do a lot more research than will ultimately end up on the screen. But in knowing your subject and knowing your theme, you will have in the editing process kind of recourse to information dimensions in your story that will actually help you develop the story in the editing and make it interesting for the audience. So really just think, don't turn up on the day and think, look, I know what I'm talking about here. I know what the story is. Another aspect of your preparation is if you're interviewing people for your story, you really need to meet with them first. Put them at their ease, let them know the broad area that you're going to be talking to them about, that they need to kind of rekindle their memory about, and that will ultimately kind of put them at their ease when you kind of turn up to interview them. I'll talk a bit more about it, you know, interviews and interviewees in a moment. The story I wanted to kind of just really focus on, because of the environmental theme of today's webinar and YRE, is a film I made in 2020. It's called Groundswell, and it's just actually gone available. It's available on Amazon Ireland now. So if you have an Amazon account, you'll be able to watch that film. There's other films called Groundswell on Amazon, so this is will be clear that when you find it, that it has an environmental theme. Essentially, the backdrop is in 2011. Ireland was in a financial crisis, and the government gave out licenses for exploration for shale gas in the border counties. And shale gas, the only way to extract it is a method called fracking, hydraulic fracturing. And that was a highly controversial technology that was creating, already we knew anecdotally, even though there wasn't very much research into it, we knew from the United States that fracking was creating a lot of damage to water supplies. There was a lot of gas entering into the atmosphere. The chemicals that were being used in the process were carcinogenic. And so we were faced here in this community where I live in North Leitrim, which is in the border counties, with the prospect of fracking. Now, I wasn't thinking at that time of making a film about it. I actually was getting involved as an environmentalist in the campaign. And after 6 years on that campaign, we ended up in Dáil Éireann, and a groundbreaking piece of legislation passed in the Irish Oireachtas, which banned the practice of fracking in Ireland. The knock-on effect of that was actually that not only did we ban fracking, but we banned the use of fracked gas from any other country in our energy mix. And that was used to block a major facility being constructed in Shannon. It's acknowledged, the ban on fracking in Ireland is acknowledged as the first big move that Ireland made, stopping the use of fossil fuels in our energy mix because of the climate impacts of the burning of fossil fuels. So small community in North Leitrim and the neighbouring border counties had an impact on a national and actually an international dimension. So when that whole campaign was over, I thought, God, that would actually make an interesting film. But I hadn't actually been documenting the process. I'd done some filming, but because I was involved as an activist, I hadn't been documenting. So I set about gathering all the archive information that other people had gathered. And then I set about interviewing people in the border counties, in Dublin, in Pennsylvania, in New York, people who were instrumental in the whole campaign against fracking. I'm going to show you a trailer now of that film, and I'll talk a bit more about it afterwards and about the process of making the film. I'm just okay, share sound. The icon has disappeared from me here. Okay, this should play now. Have you got full screen there? On the, yeah.
€4.9 billion of potential tax revenue against the fears about possible contamination of the water supply.
We're looking at an area that we concentrate on in the north part of Leitrim and South Fermanagh and the very western edge of Cavan.
I'm telling you, they're using you. You hear the plan. They're gonna junk your country up. They are using you, and you are going to be the suckers on the end of the line here.
A politician somewhere talked about Leitrim, that we needed to have sacrifice zones.
This is going on in 15 countries right now. The United States alone this year, there'll be 15,000 horizontal, multi-stage fractured wells drilled for gas.
So they're coming in now.
So there must be a frack going on somewhere.
Yeah, it's being fracked right now, yeah.
I heard a lot of heavy traffic on the road, and I looked out and I could see lorries and police jeeps and other vehicles, and I thought, my God.
This is a very toxic industry coming into, it would be like fracking a fractured community.
We know when crunch comes to it, who's going to stand on that road in Leitrim and stop them physically? Who's going to do it? The top table aren't driving up.
What scared me the most about Cork was I thought that that was going to happen to us.
Okay. So there's a lot of dimensions to that story, I suppose. And often, if you were just actually delivering pure information about fracking, it would make for a very dry story. So actually, ultimately, what becomes kind of interesting in what is a film that lasts 80 minutes is the characters, because it ended up that there was probably just 6, 7, 8 core people involved in that campaign who had to sustain their commitment over 6 or 7 years of campaigning, 6 years certainly. And that period, the children were growing up. So actually we see the children of some of the people, the activists in the film, kind of getting older and older as the story goes on. But that actually subliminally kind of gives you a sense of kind of growth within the story, that the people are changing. Nobody stays the same. The people are evolving and have to evolve to adapt as the challenge becomes bigger and bigger, if you like. And part of that challenge, that the bigger and bigger challenges, is actually sustaining your commitment over that level of time. But actually there was at the heart of Groundswell, there's a very kind of universal story, and it's a David and Goliath story. So you've got this kind of small community, a vulnerable community in North Leitrim at that time. There was a lot of emigration. We had ghost estates because of the crash in the economy at the time. There was really a sense that the community itself was struggling to stay together. And at the same time, you had not a particularly big oil and gas company, Tamboran they were called, but they knew what they were doing. They were going to, and they had laid out a plan to drill 3,000 wells in a area about 10 miles by 10 miles, North Leitrim stretching into Fermanagh. That was a major project, a major industrial project. They were very clear what they were going to be doing, and they had a lot of political support nationally because, as I said, the country was in economic peril at the time. And there wasn't the awareness about climate change, certainly at an institutional level. We on the ground had a very good sense as environmentalists what the threat from climate change was at that time, but there wasn't a very big listening, if you like, to nationally about that issue. So in making the film, I couldn't just kind of lay out the science, if you like, and that we're gathering in large volumes. We kind of had to have a development in the story, and there were twists and turns in the story, as you see in the trailer. The company is stopped in North Leitrim, which is just south of the border, and then they decided to go north of the border, where we actually had very little control. But so we had to kind of move north of the border in our campaigning and work with people in Fermanagh, which is actually still feeling the impacts of the Troubles and the division. Everything in the north, as you know, tends to be kind of politicized. The nationalist side were seen to be opposed to fracking, and therefore the so-called loyalist side were very in favor of it. So it was completely, and we had to get in there and work in a community way and saying, listen, this isn't about kind of orange or green. This is about your landscape, your land. So once that was dealt with, there was, which was happened in 2014, we still had a problem because the Irish government had appointed a company who were very pro-fracking to do the so-called independent study into the impacts of fracking, and we had to attack, if you like, that approach of the Irish government, which they had more or less done inadvertently, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had made a big misstep, which we were able to then drive home on and put them on the ropes. So, as I said, the story ends up in success. So that is ultimately a kind of positive story about the environment and about overcoming a challenge. I'm conscious that we've got about 10 minutes left, and I would like to just talk just about some of the technical challenges, how when you're making your films, how you just give yourself, do yourselves a few favors in terms of making sure your films are at a technical standard. You're all familiar, I'm sure, working with your phones. Often we we film in a vertical, which is the TikTok format, I know, and you what we call the portrait. So you've got a longer image. The vertical image is longer than the horizontal image. You need to be filming with on the horizontal axis, if you like, the way this frame, my image is framed. You need to, the widescreen format. So that's your way of filming. Try and keep your image steady as much as possible, because even over 3 minutes, if the image is moving a lot, so either put it on a tripod or have it on some kind of handheld device where you can hold your image steady. You can buy them online, where you put your phone into a holder that will allow you to have a more steady frame for in the filming of your picture. The area that people often really fall down on in making early films, or films where you don't have a lot of resources, is in sound. Now, our phones do have good microphones, but you can actually get microphones, actually lapel microphones, for about 40 euros online. I work with a colleague who just bought some for some work that he's doing. And that will connect into your phone. It's like what we call a radio mic. And so if you're interviewing someone, you can just clip it onto their lapel, and it'll be picked up in the software that comes with the mic in your phone. So it means that you'll have clear sound. So you can actually have a kind of boom, what we call a boom mic, where you kind of point the mic in, that'll go into your phone. But really monitor your sound properly on your headphones to make sure you're getting good sound, because you can have shaky picture, poor image, but if people can't actually hear what you're recording, what the people you're interviewing are saying, your film is very, very compromised. So if you're going to use graphics, I mean, there are a number of, I won't talk about editing packages. There are a number of editing packages available online. I know you can edit on TikTok, and they've got kind of in-house editing on TikTok, but you can get software available for editing online. So graphics, if you're using graphics, you usually apply graphics to your film at the end, and make sure they're big enough to read. For example, the subtitles, if you're using subtitles, if they're too small, they won't be legible. People are used to seeing text on screen now, because, as we know, like even in dramas where we kind of use text speak online, if you feel someone's a little bit inaudible in terms of something they've said, subtitle them. You can just type in the subtitles and put those in on there to go with their speech. I'm going to reiterate a point before we open for questions. I'm going to reiterate a point. Really, if you're interviewing people, prepare them. Have a think about where you're going to interview them. Make sure it's somewhere that's a little bit interesting and maybe is connected to the subject of what you're interviewing them about. In that test video, the winning video that Claire showed us there, I was struck by people who were sitting at their desks a lot, that they weren't, the situation wasn't that interesting, because film is a visual medium. So maybe get them out. If it's an environmental subject, get them out into the environment. There's technical challenges of that with wind and sound, but it's worth it. So Claire, will I stop there and then maybe we take some questions?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks so much. That was really insightful. We haven't any questions so far, Rob. I don't think they have come in, but we might just open up there to it.
That's okay.
I was going to ask you about that. So to pre-meet your interviewers, are you going in with a kind of a list of questions you might ask them to kind of pre-prep them, or is that just to get a sense of who you are, right, and who they are?
I think it's I mean, hopefully what you get when you're interviewing someone is a kind of a fresh interview. So so yeah, I think you put them at ease that they actually know what they're talking about, because it's often the first thing when you call someone up and say, listen, I'd like to interview some, I don't really know much about that subject. It's like, yeah. So I'm doing a documentary at the moment about the Spanish Civil War, and I just called someone last week about interviewing her, and I knew that she had been quite involved. It's a story about a nurse from Sligo who is served in the Spanish Civil War. And she said, okay, you're going to have to refresh me on that. So I said, I sent her a note. And then she sends me a note back. And one of the challenges we were having in that documentary was that we had very little. The nurse's name is Ruth Ormsby, and she served in Spain in 1937-38. And we hadn't found her much about her voice. People had said that there were letters from her, but that she did write letters back to her brother, but we had nothing. And last night, so the woman I was speaking to last week, who said, listen, Johnny, you're going to have to refresh me on this. She sends me a document that is the first document that I have in the voice of our subject. And it's a letter written to her brother in her closing weeks in Spain in the Spanish Civil War. So by actually just taking that time to reach out, as we say, to your subject, so much more can come back because you've taken the time and you've prepared them, because none of us have total recall, and we need to kind of sleep on a subject and then actually, so in preparing her, I'm going to go into the interview with her now on Thursday, and we'll be able to cover so much more than I would have expected to cover if I just said, listen, Bernie, I'm turning up next week to interview you. And she might have just said, okay, because she doesn't want to be too put me out at all. But actually, just by taking the preparation time, you will get so much more back potentially from your interviewee.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And that applies to anyone who you're interviewing. Even if they come over as being professional. We saw on the video there, these people were spokespeople for a subject, so we expect them to know. But actually, even if they're spokespeople, you actually, by giving them more preparation, time, and just saying, I just don't want the spiel. I want to hear what got you into this subject, what made you passionate about it before you became the person you are as the spokesperson for the subject. So yeah.
The other thing I picked up on you saying about turning your cameras to your phone to the side, right? And it's something that I've preached for a long time. It means that you can actually have a team of people working individually, separately, and then bring it all together at the end. And I think that's important to kind of hit home with the groups. If they're working as a group doing things, if you have a standardized how you're going to shoot it from the start, then it makes that editing process better. And is that something that you would kind of agree with, or have anything else to say on that?
Well, film is a collaborative medium. So, if you've got someone working on research, you've got someone working on camera. And one of the things, say, in terms of your technical preparation, do tests, with your camera. Go out and shoot something in different ways, handheld, fixed, put it on a tripod or on some way you have, if you're using your phone, to fix your phone, as I alluded to earlier on. So you can work out a style. Because are you going to go for a handheld style in your filming? If so, you need to apply that right through your interviewees. Or are you going to go for a static format? So you need to apply that right through. Or if you're going handheld, you're using that for, say, evolving from having static images of your interviewees. You might decide you want to kind of film someone moving because they're actually bringing, they're going to show you something about a particular subject or a particular place. So then that will be a progression in your grammar, if you like, in the grammar that you're using in your film. So so mixing handheld and static approaches is nothing wrong with that, but it's just as long as it's motivated by the story, that your choices are motivated by the needs of the story.
So would you storyboard it then, or are you letting the story lead you into that decision?
No, I think it's back to, I wouldn't push it so much towards storyboarding, which is something that we use in drama quite a lot. And, you know, I'd only storyboard in a drama if it was an action sequence where you really are needing to communicate to a lot of crew members what's happening in that scene, because you may only have one or two goes at crashing that car, or
yeah.
You know, so yeah, so it's more your prep with your interview is visit your locations before, because you might turn up at a location thinking it looks great, but there's traffic, there's a road right beside your location, and it's going to be really, really compromising the recording of your interview because it's so loud. But so visit your, check out your locations beforehand. Check out you've got permissions to go in if it's on someone's private property, or if it's into a, we're going into a graveyard, church graveyard on Thursday. We need to kind of check with the church that it's okay to go in, that we just don't turn up and get thrown out because we didn't get permission, because that'll blow your shoot if you go about it in that way. So preparation, a lot of film is preparation. So turning up with a good plan. Not everything is kind of enshrined in stone. So you need to be open to changing dynamics, changing circumstances. But at least if you've got a plan as a foundation, then the chance of success is greatly heightened.
One of the things I would have struggled with is if it wasn't using a tripod and it's using the handheld device, would be, you mentioned your phone holder. Is there any do's or don'ts for picking your phone holder? Have you used other props or anything in intervention on the moment to kind of help?
Sorry to cut across you, Claire. No, I think there are just good steady cam phone holders that they give you that steady cam effect. But if you've got a tripod and can mount your camera on your tripod, I always advise that.
And can I ask, Johnny, in terms of subject area, if a student is sort of stuck for a subject area, would you recommend kind of looking at the local area to see if there's any close to home issues that could enlighten them, give them a bit of direction?
Completely, and that's the sooner you start kind of talking to people about that you want to make this film, the more someone will throw material at you, which might be kind of a bit intrusive at times, a bit too much. But actually, if you've got a lot of storytellers are like magpies. They've got a good antenna for picking up stories. Pick up your local paper, buy your local paper. They're full of stories of local interest, and people, don't be afraid to ask people to talk to you about their story. Don't tell them straight away necessarily you want to make a film about them, but or about the work that they did, but actually tell them that you're just kind of researching the subject, and then maybe kind of raise it with them that would they be interested in being interviewed? Would they be happy to be interviewed for the story? But yeah, we're surrounded by stories, and looking close to home, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
It's really good advice there. Thanks, Johnny. I might stop the recording there and see if anyone wants to come in and ask any more questions, because there's nothing else coming in there on the chat at the minute. I let people get back to their lunches. But thanks so much for that. That's been really, really, really informative and useful, especially with the interviewing guidance as well, and techniques, and coming up with ideas as well. So great to get started.
I hope I wasn't too long-winded about any of it, but hopefully we covered quite a bit, I think, so yeah.
And we'll just reiterate your film is available on Prime to watch, stream now as well.
It is, yeah.
I'll definitely be checking it out. So I recommend to anyone else. I was familiar with the situation anyway, keeping an eye on it on the social media over the last while. So it'll be nice to see a kind of fuller picture of what went on as well.
In relation to fracking, yeah.
Yeah, I have a number of my former college colleagues were involved in research around fracking. So I have a limited knowledge of it, I suppose, but
well,
maybe more than most, but it's still limited. So it'll add to that for me.
It's rare to have a happy ending story, and
yeah,
it's important that people know those stories, that because there's quite a lot of sense of resignation around the whole issue of climate change at the moment, and what can we do? It's too big a subject. It's we sort of gone from a kind of a state of kind of climate denial, if you like, to one of climate resignation, and which isn't good.
Yeah.